It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done.
That's why I'm more interested not in how the Egyptians built the pyramids, but how the pyramids helped to build Egypt.
Scientists thought they already understood how the ancient Egyptians cut granite. Copper tools, stone hammers, tens of thousands of straining bodies. So when researchers fed the famous Aswan Quarry into Grok AI, they expected the machine to confirm everything the textbooks already said. It didn't. The answer it returned was so far outside anything they had predicted that it stopped everyone in the room cold. Because if the AI is right, the marks carved into that stone could not have been made by the people history insists made them. So what did it actually see? Stay with me, because once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. The stone that shouldn't exist. On the southern banks of the Nile, in a stretch of Egyptian desert that most tour buses pass in under 5 minutes, sits a place that has been quietly confusing researchers for generations. It is called the Aswan Granite Quarry. At first glance, it looks like nothing remarkable. Enormous half-finished blocks. Abandoned stone. The flat, pressing silence of the desert over all of it. But the moment you step close to the rock itself, that ordinary feeling dissolves. Because the stone is the whole problem. This is not soft limestone or crumbly sandstone. This is granite, sitting at roughly a 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, resisting cutting so stubbornly that even modern equipment treats it as a serious challenge. People who work granite professionally will tell you it can feel harder than ordinary steel. Hold that fact close, because everything that follows leans on it. Now look at what is carved into that granite. Long, sweeping, curved cuts run across the rock surface, spaced with near-perfect regularity. They look as though something rolled across the stone in one smooth, unbroken motion. In places, the marks flow into each other like ripples spreading across still water. No jagged breaks, no scattered chaos. None of the uneven, stuttering mess a tired human hand leaves behind. Almost everyone who sees them for the first time reacts the same way. They lean in. They go quiet. And they ask the same question out loud. Are these really thousands of years old? Because at first sight, they look exactly like the work of a modern machine. And that gut reaction, that instinct that something here is profoundly out of place, is where this entire mystery cracks open. The old theory and why it failed. For a very long time, the history books have offered one steady, comfortable answer. The ancient Egyptians used dolerite, a brutally hard rock, sometimes called diorite, shaped into heavy balls and hand hammers. Workers pounded the granite with these tools again and again, hour after hour, until it slowly surrendered its shape. This is still the version taught in most classrooms today. The scale of it is genuinely staggering. Historians estimate that tens of thousands of laborers passed through these quarries, figures often settling around 20,000 workers. Roughly 15,000 rotating through regular shifts, so the work never stopped. Men striking stone for something close to 12 hours a day, for months or sometimes years before a single large block came free. Put enough people on an impossible task and give them enough time. Even the impossible starts to look reachable. That is a fair argument, and it deserves respect. The trouble arrived when researchers stopped debating the theory and decided to actually test it. They built the same pounding tools the textbooks describe. They brought in strong, skilled craftsmen and struck large granite blocks thousands of times, exactly the way the mainstream account lays out. Everyone expected the granite to slowly take on that ancient appearance. It did not. The marks the hammers left were rough and uneven. Some blows bit deep, others barely scratched. Every impact landed slightly differently. Edges crumbled, surfaces splintered. There was no clean spacing, no graceful curve, just the honest, messy reality of human effort. And here is what made the experiment so revealing. It was not only that it failed, it was how it failed. The harder the men worked, the messier the stone became. Speed introduced more error, not less. Fatigue crept in within the first hour. Grips loosened. Spacing wandered. The team had set out to confirm the textbook, and instead quietly disproven the one part everyone assumed was settled. Now set that beside the actual marks at Aswan, and the contrast is almost violent. The real cuts look as though a tool traveled across the stone in one steady direction at constant speed. Long curved arcs, near identical spacing, a level of consistency that should not exist because no matter how skilled a person is, the body has limits. People tire. The angle of every swing drifts. That drift is not a flaw. It is biology. And yet in the Aswan marks, that ordinary human inconsistency is almost nowhere to be found. This is the exact point where the old story and the stone stop agreeing. What Grok AI saw, when researchers accepted that the old theory could not explain the marks, they handed the entire question to an artificial intelligence and told it to judge the evidence cold, with no prior knowledge of what answer anyone was hoping for. First, they built the data using photogrammetry, thousands of overlapping high-resolution images stitched into precise, three-dimensional digital models of the quarry surfaces. Then all of it was fed into Grok AI's analytical system, set up to compare marks left by different categories of tools. The AI was never told this was Egypt. It was not told what tools might have been used or what conclusion to reach. Its only job was to measure patterns and compare them against thousands of tool signatures, ancient and modern, in its database. It worked through 847 separate cuts. For each one, it measured the curve and arc radius, the angle at which the tool appeared to enter the stone, the depth of every cut, the distance between neighbors, and the consistency across the entire field of marks. A machine does this without tiring and without wanting a particular answer. A human expert walks into Aswan already believing the textbook. They expect hammers, so they tend to see hammers. The AI carried none of that baggage. Then the report loaded. Across all 847 cuts scattered through different corners of the quarry, the total variation came out to 4.3%. That is the number that stopped them. In engineering terms, it is close to frightening. Even a master craftsman repeating one single motion will drift, the hand rises a little, the angle shifts, the force changes. That is why even with good modern hand tools, a variation between 12 and 20% is considered completely normal. Pushing toward 22% surprises no one. A person is not a machine. And yet, here were hundreds of cuts spread across a working quarry, separated by only 4.3%. The AI also flagged the entry angles, strikingly similar across every cut, as though each stroke had been planned in advance and followed with mechanical discipline. It looked less like thousands of workers and more like a single system performing nearly the same action every single time. That was the moment this stopped being a quiet archaeology puzzle and became a hard question about engineering. If human hands leave 12 to 22% variation, and these marks show only 4.3%, then who made them? And what did they use? The machine match and the impossible shafts. The system now had to decide what tool these marks most closely resembled, so it ran them against thousands of profiles, from hand hammers to Bronze Age implements to the most advanced industrial machines on the planet today. It tested the pounding stone theory first. The same wall appeared. Marks from hammering are irregular by nature. Depth wanders. The angle of each blow differs. The Aswan cuts showed near equal spacing and a repeating disciplined pattern that pounding simply does not produce. So the machine turned to modern tools, and three matches rose to the top. Diamond rotary cutters, tipped with hard diamond abrasive, that spins at high speed, leaving clean and consistent marks even on granite. Water jet systems, which carve stone with a high-pressure stream laced with abrasive particles, prized for their controlled cuts. And ultrasonic cutting, where a blade vibrates at a frequency beyond human hearing, producing astonishingly precise results. What separates these from a hammer is not just sharpness, it is repeatability. A machine carves the 800th cut exactly like the first. The AI released its confidence score. The closest match for the Aswan cuts was an industrial rotary cutting process. Grok AI placed its confidence at roughly 94%, and across hundreds of cuts in different parts of the quarry, the entry angle varied by less than 2 degrees. Holding that consistency by hand is considered close to impossible. But then the shafts made the case even harder to dismiss. Scattered across the site are deep, narrow shafts plunging roughly 30 to 50 feet straight down, many only 3 to 4 feet wide at the mouth. Down on those shaft walls are the same curved, uniform spiraling cuts found in the open quarry above. Same depth, same pattern, same shape. Here is the problem. If this work was done by swinging heavy dolerite hammers, a worker needs at least 18 to 24 inches of clearance to draw the hammer back and generate enough force to actually break granite. The entire hammer theory depends on that arc. Take away the swing, and you take away the speed. A dolerite ball pressed against granite with no run-up does almost nothing. Inside these shafts, that clearance does not exist. In many spots, can barely stand upright, let alone wind up a full swing. And yet, the marks on those walls are identical to the cuts in the wide open areas above, made apparently without any loss of control. When the shaft data went into Grok AI, the system weighed the width of the space, the angle of the cuts, the hardness of the granite, and the clearance a hammer swing demands. It placed the situation in the category of physically impossible due to spatial constraints. But a system applying force straight down from the front, with no backswing at all, could produce these same cuts even in the narrowest corner. And that quietly eliminates the one method the textbooks insist was used: under the microscope and the reversed timeline. When stone is struck repeatedly with a heavy tool, the surface breaks apart. Tiny crystals crack in random directions. Edges turn rough. Small fissures spread down into the material. Under magnification, hammered granite looks like a miniature battlefield, all splinters and stress lines. The Aswan marks looked nothing like that. Under the lens, researchers found a surface that did not appear broken at all. It looked cleanly cut, a sharp, deliberate boundary between the cut surface and the untouched stone beside it. It did not look struck. It looked as though a precise tool had separated the material along a chosen line, and there was almost no damage beneath the cut. If hammers had done this, cracks should reach down into the stone below. Nothing of the kind was there. Then came the spirals, extremely fine rotating marks suggesting a spinning tool had traveled across the granite while turning continuously in one direction. In samples from completely different parts of the quarry, those spirals ran the same way. Then came the heat, tiny zones on the cut surfaces showing signs of thermal alteration, the fingerprint of very high temperature concentrated at a small point, the way friction concentrates under a fast-spinning blade. And in the cut surfaces, researchers found microscopic grains of corundum, which sits at a 9 on the Mohs scale and is used today as an abrasive in industrial cutting discs. In some spots, carbon structures that several described as having a diamond-like form. Any one of those clues alone you could argue about. Stacked together, they stop sounding like coincidence and start sounding like a description of a tool. When all of this went into Grok AI, the machine returned a conclusion that fit the rest of the story uncomfortably well. The closest match was a process we would describe today as industrial-grade diamond abrasive rotary cutting. Under the lens, the granite had not been broken. It had been machined. Then the timeline turned everything upside down. Across parts of the quarry are ancient red ochre paintings that sit directly on top of the cutting marks, meaning the stone was cut first, and only much later did someone paint over it. When those paintings were dated, some researchers suggested they could be nearly 2,000 years older than the early dynastic civilization of Egypt. If the paintings are that old, the cuts beneath them have to be older still, dropping the timeline into the pre-dynastic period, a time when, according to mainstream history, only small scattered groups lived in the region with the simplest stone tools imaginable. The AI compared the geometry of the cuts against their estimated ages in what it called temporal precision analysis. The result, at about 91% confidence, ran completely backward. The older a cut appeared, the more precise and uniform it was. As the timeline moved forward, the cuts grew rougher and less controlled. The relationship reached the 99th percentile of statistical significance, extremely unlikely to be random. The same trend surfaced again and again across the entire dataset. Every civilization we know of improves its technology over time. Early work is crude, later work is refined. Aswan tells the opposite story. The oldest work is the finest. And that raises a question almost too large to hold. What if the people at the very beginning already knew something the ones who came after them had forgotten? The same marks everywhere. If the mystery stopped at a single quarry, it would be easy to file away as a local curiosity. It doesn't stop there. The team ran the Aswan data against the Giza complex, focusing on the Valley Temple of Khafra, one of the oldest and most puzzling granite structures in the country, where enormous blocks weighing hundreds of tons are fitted together so tightly that a blade cannot slip between them. When those surfaces were examined under the microscope, the same signatures from Aswan appeared, the same clean boundaries, almost no internal fracturing, the same faint curved marks suggesting the rotation of a spinning tool. The AI then measured the difference between the Giza cuts and the Aswan cuts directly. The variation between the two locations was under 5%. Different sites, different blocks, and yet nearly the same cutting method. Researchers then folded in other granite sites across the Nile Delta, and similar marks appeared there too, and the same eerie pattern repeated. The work believed to be oldest looked the most precise, while later marks grew rougher and more ordinary. When Grok AI combined the full data set from across Egypt, it reached a conclusion at roughly 89% confidence. This does not look like the story of one location. It looks as though at some point in deep antiquity, the same cutting technology was in use across the entire region, and then it faded out. A single skilled workshop you could explain, a lucky generation of master carvers, a technique passed quietly between a few hands, but the same fingerprint showing up hundreds of kilometers apart on different stone at different sites, separated by under 5%, is not a workshop. That is a standard. The kind of consistency you only get when an entire civilization shares one method and one set of tools. And then somehow that shared standard vanished from the record so completely that we spent centuries insisting it never existed. The stone hammer theory keeps failing the test. Even after careful hands-on experiments, no one has reproduced marks that match what is actually carved into the quarry. Maybe our timeline is simply incomplete. Maybe there is a missing chapter we have not found yet. Or maybe the answer is something we are not quite ready to say out loud. Whatever it is, the stone is not waiting for us to catch up. The marks are still there. That 4.3% is still there. And it is not asking history for answers anymore. It feels more like it is quietly taking them away, one cut at a time, and daring someone to notice. So I want to hear from you. After everything we just walked through, do you think this is lost technology, a dating mistake, or something we are not yet ready to name? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe history is still hiding more than it is telling, subscribe and tap the bell so you are the first one here when the next discovery refuses to stay buried.